On today's Minute of the Apes, we're now starting the third film, which is both a sequel, a prequel, and a reboot.
Hello and welcome to Minute of the Apes, the daily podcast where we break down every minute of the Planet of the Apes films, 1 minute at a time. I have got Richard and Sean sitting across from me. After so many weeks off, here we are. We are, as Sean put it, we are beginning the Force Awakens film of the Planet of the Apes.
Planet of the Apes, yes.
It's not you can't say trilogy. What is that when you have five films?
Pentology?
I guess so. So we really are. We're rebooting, we're sequeling, we're doing everything in this one. But here we are, guys, finally getting going again.
Kind of getting going again.
Maybe that's kind of the mantra for today. So we've had a little bit of time off, as we teased, but we are going to start churning these out regularly on a daily basis. But here we are at what is one of my favorite films within this. What was it again, Sean? When it's five films?
Pentology?
Pentology. So in the Planet of the Apes Pentology, we don't necessarily have a count or anything. Why don't we do this before we even jump into the film? Why don't we start with where we begin with this film? Let's start with some stats. Sean lost a microphone.
Michael.
So after the success of Beneath the Planet of the Apes, and that was not expected at all, Arthur B. Jacobs sent a famous note to Paul Dane that said, "Apes exist, sequel necessary." How do you begin writing?
Apes exist.
Yes, that was the teletype or the message that he sent was like, apes exist.
Sequel necessary. So if you're Paul Dane,
yeah,
how do you look at this and you think, oh crap, because of the Xanax and because of Charlton, we blew up the planet. Where do you begin?
Well, but let me ask you this. Just based upon somewhat of the negative reaction to Beneath, why are you going back to Paul Dane again?
Because he at least maybe under the gun really churned out something.
I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't have turned to him as well.
That's a good point.
It's just wondering why would, okay, you know what? I got to go to this guy. We got to make this happen. Is he just knew he could do it in a deadline? Does he just know that? I mean, are there even, is Jacobs even thinking about doing a quality sequel? Or is he thinking about, or is it just more of a cash grab? I mean, is he really loving the property? Were they seeing what was happening in marketing and product and toys and that stuff like, okay, we got to do more?
I have the feeling that, to me, Arthur B. Jacobs had to see, at least this time, that, look, we have something that could sustain itself, because this is the only film of the original Pentology that has an open ending that says there's more to come. So there was at least the idea, and I know I'm teasing something, Sean, that you don't know, but it does at least say we could continue from here. I think that they at least went and said, we have to write this smartly this time. We can't work ourselves into a corner again that we can't get out of. So,
yeah, I mean, if somebody says to me, Apes, after the first or second movie, world's blown up, Apes, yes, we have dogs here too. We are
snoring in the background.
Zeus Comics North at the Hartzell household.
Yeah, they came up to see me because unfortunately I'm out of the sling, but I still can't drive. So the guys are coming up to see me today.
We're coming north for the foreseeable future, for the rest of the year. Yeah. If they said Apes exist, sequel necessary or whatever, I would think either you fudge it and you say everybody didn't die after the explosion and you do another story there, or you do a parallel story that's going on in another city that's telling another ape story.
Right. We expand the civilization in such a way that maybe the Earth itself was not destroyed. Maybe there's other civilizations underground, or it's a story that's happening concurrently with the story that's going on
in the first two movies. Or you do a prequel that's in between Earth times and ape times and tell a story there. And in this case, they decide to go way back to Earth or human times.
Well, we're used to that now in terms of the media that happens around us. I mean, Rick Grimes is getting a series of movies, and they're going to do a prequel to The Walking Dead where it's focusing on the police story between the two of them, and it's younger Rick. Was it even that common at the time to do that kind of a story where you would do a story that's happening concurrently, or a story that takes place in between moments? Or, I mean, I don't know if it was that common.
He got such little time. They could have done a story that just solely focused on Ursus, not like the comic book did. I mean, because he got so little screen time. He was built up to be the big bad, and then really he just kind of marched people in and then got shot and died.
But let's be quite honest. At this time, sequels weren't even normal. So they certainly wouldn't think of cross-cutting narratives, which, I think without having it in front of me, you could look at Godfather 2 as possibly the first that ever said we're going to make a sequel and also a prequel.
Okay.
And I don't know that there were too many prequel ideas. I don't know that term really came into the nomenclature of film until
Star Wars.
Lucas did it. I can't think of anything else that was a prequel. It's a very odd thing. So at least they turned to Dane, and the result they get to me is infinitely better than the first one. I'm going to toss it out there that I'm so excited already. Having done my notes for the first 10 minutes, I found myself so giddy at shot composition, pacing, information, exactly what we complained about with Beneath was how things didn't make sense. Characters didn't react logically. And I already see that working within these first few minutes.
Just in the first few minutes, yeah. So just a reminder to the audience, Sean is still watching these minute by minute. So he does not know the end of the movie or how, the minutes that come. So when we talk about this, we are still doing by minute. We are still trying to not talk about things that we know in the future minutes, just from the rules of this type of podcast. Right. One of the debates we have right now in these opening sequences is we're debating whether the trailer would be known to the audience walking into the movie or whether the trailer is unknown, which changes the elements of the opening as to whether it's surprise, whether there's character information we can talk about. There's kind of a little bit of what can we talk about? What can't we talk about?
And I think to be fair to the audience too, we do a bit of pre-production as we get into these. And first off, we haven't seen each other in 6 to 8 weeks, something like that. And so I think there was at least oh God, we've got all these things we're thinking about. And that was one of the very key points that came up was walking into it. If you'd seen that trailer, there would be no suspense inherently in that moment because you know who's coming out of that capsule, etc.
But fortunately, that's not a huge spoiler because that happens within the first 5 minutes of the movie. So it's not like that's something that they're holding off. They're going to be in spacesuits until the end of the movie. Then they pull off the helmet and you find out that they're apes.
There's an entire opening scene that was scrapped that they don't even have footage of. They have stills of that is dialogue that would have been, and to me, more interesting.
And maybe this is the point where we should discuss it. Let me go through some stats about the making of.
Well, hang on. Before we even get to that, let me do the very opening of this. We're going to start minute 1 with a shot of the cliffside and oceans, and ends with the helicopter pilot saying they remain on station.
Let's be fair and let's play our clip. The first minute from Escape from the Planet of the Apes.
Southeast corner of Sector Alpha Charlie, and we spotted what appears to be a spacecraft just outside the surf line. Alert rescue and advise we can remain on station.
All right, as it started the movie, we're going to restart the clock on the character count. So as of right now, we have 0 people. So we'll find out as it goes along.
So
we assume there's apes.
We assume, and humans.
It's from the Planet of the Apes, so they escaped from something, and you think
are mutants in your count?
No, because they're all dead. They all blowed up.
0.
But I mean, when you say this film is opening up, are you opening up?
I'm going. There are no people as of right now.
All right.
When we start the movie,
we have 0 and 0 and 0.
Okay, so Escape from the Planet of the Apes came out in 1971.
I hadn't even been born yet.
I would have been probably about 4 years old.
I'm a year away from being born.
So it came out in 71 with a budget of $2.5 million. It would go on to gross 12.3. So this franchise is still
money
got
making.
Some big
that's
legs.
A good return.
And that's $70. So what is that? Adjusted for inflation, that's got to be at least almost $100 million. I would think.
Now I did find an interesting stat that each of the Planet of the Apes films held on to the #1 box office position. At least for the first week. The original stayed, but the rest of them apparently had 1 week #1s, and they would move on. G-rated.
Really? Okay.
98 minutes of runtime. So
yep.
slightly longer than the last
like
one.
4 minutes longer.
Yes, but I think you'll find that even with an economical story, this one feels
better.
deeper. It was shot between November 30th, 1970 and wrapped production on January 20th of 71. The film is set in 73 for whatever reason.
Right.
Because they want to make it a modern film.
So this is the next thing that I have, and this leads to what Richard said. The original drafts had images of the Aponauts watching the Earth blow up, going away from the footage, etc. That footage was never seen by anyone other than early daily prints, is what I have.
The thing is, the Earth doesn't actually blow up. It's not like the planet's there, then it's gone.
But
they radiate the surface.
I mean, we didn't see that. All we saw was the flash of
white light,
light.
And then the narration of
over it.
But I think in 1970, you have to understand their understanding of a nuclear bomb. You had an atomic bomb that could decimate a city. A nuclear bomb to them was... we were told you were going to blow up the world. I remember being terrified of that as a kid, that the world would blow up.
Crack like an egg.
Yeah. And so I think they were playing to that. Now, I don't know what the special effect would have been. They may have only gone for a big boom.
Yeah.
But that gets us into what Richard has.
Do you want to talk about the scene now, or do you want to go through this minute and then talk about the scene afterwards? Because I feel like let's
talk about the scene now, just because this minute doesn't have a ton of stuff to it, because we get an introductory of we're on a beach. We see a helicopter. We see a few things like that. We begin to set the table of what is happening here. But honestly, I think that this potential scene, we should at least go through it.
Okay. So it opens with explosion of rockets. As we watch, it speeds away from the camera. It soars into space, a spaceship. Through the windows, the same light lividly illuminates 3 spacesuited and helmeted astronauts. Afraid and curiously hesitant at the controls, we establish a dual date meter showing the year in terms of both Earth time and self time. Both panels read 3955. We actually have some dialogue back and forth between the astronauts. Astronaut 1, who's a male, says, "We made it." Astronaut 2, who is also a male, says, "So far, but one thing is for certain, whoever wins the war, there'll be no place on Earth for us." Astronaut 3 designated female, "Where are we going?" Astronaut 2 replies briskly, "To our death, but just possibly." Soundless explosion, column of fire and cloud mushrooming up towards us. Appalled silence to the ship windows. The astronauts are watching, and we with them, the nuclear disintegration of Earth. The incandescent almost burns through their space helmets. In awed voices, Astronaut 2, "The fools, they finally destroyed themselves." Astronaut 1, "My God, the Earth is no more."
I wonder, because...
Astronaut 3, "And we've escaped."
There's
even some more in here. Astronaut 2, "We have, if we survive the shockwave." And then here it is. "Chaos and pandemonium inside. We multiplied normal air turbulence 1,000-fold and are bashed and buffeted, whirled, twirled, lifted 100 miles and dropped 50 before slowly flattening out to some sort of semblance of equilibrium and presumably a new orbit. The date meter digits under Earth time have begun to click and race erratically." Astronaut 2 watches intently. Astronaut 2, "The shock wave must have unbalanced the mechanism I don't understand as it curves the descending graph line which traces optimum re-entry path. Now the lights begin to trace the spacecraft's actual re-entry path, which sometimes slightly deviates to the left or the right of the graph line, but always approximately follows its course. Astronaut 2, been forced out of our orbit. Astronaut 1, we're descending. Astronaut 3, but where? Fiery missile descends on our screen. Descent is rapid and suddenly through the blackened windows. The entry is completed for light. Can be seen flickering through the charred cracks. Shooting across the frozen astronauts, we see the date meter spin to a halt. Earth time 1973. Ship time 3955.
That's a impressive clock that it can do the year and the date.
We are crashing rapidly into the ocean. The spacecraft splits the water into churning waves, then the Earth is still. And that's when the helicopter appears.
I can see potentially why some of that was cut, because even though the reveal's coming a couple minutes later of who these characters are, unless they really took the bass and clipped the audio, made it sound like radio mics and stuff like that, you might be able to tell whose voice is who by the previous movies. You might be able to tell who the actors are doing the voices. And at least 2 of them.
And honestly, we get into the last time with Beneath the Planet of the Apes, there was necessary information that was not delivered. Mm-hmm. I don't know that this information has to be given for us to understand what's going to happen, because in the film, we will kind of begin to understand. We also know they blew things up. We see that the Liberty One, the Icarus, whichever name you want to use, is charred. Something heavily has charred it when it came back in. While it's compelling, and while it's interesting, and it might have created a sense of mystery, now we have to get into, again, marketing. why they chose. I know why they chose to show the ape reveal, because if you're going to do a teaser trailer for this, you have to show the apes within human culture and how do they get there.
Otherwise, if you don't show them, it's literally just a movie about people.
Well, the only thing I thought that they could do